Welcome to a new Sunday and welcome to my new series German Politics Explained. If you're interested in German politics and want to learn something about its structure, then you've come to the right place. But first, if you haven't done so yet, please subscribe to my channel so you'll never miss another episode of the series or any other video you might want to watch. But now, let's get started with the video. You probably learned a lot about German history in school, if it was a topic in your school at all. But from my experience, many people don't know how Germany is today and what the structure of Germany is today, what the political system is today. And so I decided to make a series where I will explain the German politics and its structures for people for other countries. And today we just get started with some basics, and we'll build it up week to week, and you will hopefully learn something, and it will be at least a bit interesting for you. But now we're going to start with the basics of the structure of Germany. As I said, we're starting with some basics about the structure of the German political system. What you can see here is the whole country since 1990. Before the reunification it looked different. I come to this at the end of the video again. But this is what Germany looks like now. You can already see that there are lines within the country, because Germany has a federal government which is responsible for the country as a whole, and there are 16 states which I will show you today. The federal government and the state governments have different sets of topics they have to deal with. Those details I will go to in another video, because that would make it much too complicated for today. But first we'll start with the country as a whole and the 16 states, and we'll get in the first one right now. The first one in the west is North Rhine-Westphalia, Nordrhein-Westfalen. I'm starting with this one because that is my home state. Germany as a whole country has about 83 million inhabitants, and North Rhine-Westphalia is the state with the most inhabitants of all of the states. They have almost 18 million inhabitants. North Rhine-Westphalia has a state government and a state parliament called the Landtag, and they are quite important because there's a lot of things the states are responsible for, and they are dealing with that. The next state north of North Rhine-Westphalia is Lower Saxony, Niedersachsen, which is another one of the bigger states. It has about 8 million inhabitants, and as North Rhine-Westphalia they have a state government and they have a state parliament, a Landtag. As well as in Lower Saxony and North Rhine-Westphalia, there were a lot of British troops stationed after the Second World War, until most of the British forces have left back home after a few years after the reunifications. The next state is Schleswig-Holstein, the most northern state of Germany. They have about 8 million inhabitants, and they also have a state government and a Landtag. There will be some different regulations in the last 3 states I will talk about, because they are not similar to these, but still states. but Schleswig-Holstein is one of the states with a state government and a state parliament. Their neighbor state is Mecklenburg-Vorpommern. It's quite large, as you can see, but they only have 1.6 million people living there. Mecklenburg-Vorpommern is now the first one of the states that belonged to the German Democratic Republic before reunifications. That means they were part of the Eastern Bloc with the Soviet Union. In the end, I'm going to show you something about Western Germany and Eastern Germany during the time before the reunification. But Mecklenburg-Vorpommern was one of the eastern states, and so state that belonged to the German Democratic Republic, not to the Federal Republic of Germany. They also have a state government and a state parliament. The next one is Brandenburg, another one of the former of the states that belonged to the German Democratic Republic before. They have about 2.5 million inhabitants. Also with a state government and a state parliament. And Brandenburg is a bit special because you see, like you saw before with Schleswig-Holstein, Lower Saxony, there is a gap in the middle, because there in Brandenburg, in the middle of Brandenburg, is Berlin, which is our capital now, and so they completely surround Berlin. Another former Eastern German states is Saxony-Anhalt, They have about 2.5 million inhabitants, and they are a normal state today with a state government and a state parliament, and are equal to the others. Then we come to Hesse. That's a state in the former Federal Republic of Germany, right at the border to the former East. They have about 6.2 million inhabitants, have state government and state parliament, and at the moment continuing the first ever Christian Democrat Greens government of one of the big states. Their neighbors are Thuringia. I'm sorry for that. In German it's Thüringen, another state of the former Eastern Germany. They have about 2.1 or 2.2 million inhabitants and are what we call a Flächenstaat. That means, like the other ones I've showed you before, they have a lot of land, no matter what the number of inhabitants is. And because of that, they have the standard state government and the standard state parliament. Then there's Saxony, Sachsen, another one of the former Eastern German states. They have about, what was it again, 4 million inhabitants, and they, like Brandenburg and Saxony-Anhalt, I guess, will have elections soon, and so there's a lot of interesting stuff going on about some right-wing party where we have quite a close look on in the East, but it's not a general phenomenon, but they are quite strong in these states at the moment. So in future videos I will definitely tell you about that, and about the special I'm lack of words right now, but I'm not cutting this out. You should know I'm a native German speaker. They have a lot to cope with. Still, I mean, the reunification is just heading towards its 30th birthday, and there's a lot still to work on. The next one is Rhineland-Palatinate, Rhineland-Pfalz. Some of you might know it for wine, because there are a lot of vineyards in Rhineland-Palatinate. It has about 4 million inhabitants, and also has a state government and a state parliament, and a lot of great food and great wines. The Saarland is the second smallest state regarding inhabitants. It has almost 1 million inhabitants, and is in the southwest of Germany, and still has a state government and a state parliament. Now we come to one of the bigger states again. This is Baden-Württemberg, with around 11 million inhabitants. It is also well known for its vineyards and food, but at the moment it is quite unique, because for the first time, we talked about another first-timer there with the Christian Democrat Green government, but in this case we have a first-timer with the first Green Christian Democrat government, because the Prime Minister of Baden-Württemberg is a Green. And then the neighbor in the south, that's the land-wise biggest state in Germany, and a second biggest state in Germany regarding inhabitants, with around 13 million inhabitants. That's Bavaria, or Bayern as we say. They traditionally have a Christian socialist government. It's the only state where this party exists, because they and the Christian Democrats made a kind of a pact long time ago that the Christian Democrats won't run in Bavaria and the Christian Socialists won't run in the rest of Germany. But that's some stuff with tradition and so on. We'll get to details later on. Now we have the first of our three special states, as I just quoted for better explaining. They have the same rank in our constitution as the others, but this is Bremen, in the heart of Lower Saxony, because it's a city-state. They don't have a prime minister, they have a first mayor, and they do have a parliament, of course, but they are not called Landtag. In Bremen it's the Bürgerschaft, and in the state government there are no ministers. Their similar positions are called senators. They are the smallest state in Germany, with around 600,000 inhabitants. The second city-state we have is Hamburg, right on the border between Schleswig-Holstein and Lower Saxony, and definitely a city most of you will have heard about. Hamburg has 1.8 million inhabitants, roundabout, and like Bremen, they have a first mayor and a Bürgerschaft instead of a Landtag, and they are of course special because the whole state contains of one city, but Hamburg as well is one of our 16 states. And last but not least, because I did it intentionally, there's Berlin. Berlin is another city-state, but quite big one compared to some of the other states with 3.6 million inhabitants. And at the same time, since short after the reunification, Berlin is the capital of Germany. Until the fall of the Berlin Wall, Bonn in North Rhine-Westphalia was a provisional capital. But now that Germany is reunited, the German parliament decided to make Berlin the capital again. And it is now. And in Berlin, we of course have a first mayor and a state parliament, and all the local political institutions. I will talk about in later videos about the other states as well. But of course the federal government is based in Berlin as well as the Bundestag of federal parliament and the Bundesrat, which is a second house we have, containing of members of the states and the states governments, which is our second chamber for a lot of decisions. Today I obviously will not go into these details, but you will learn about this in later videos. But they all are based in Berlin, so Berlin is of course quite a special state we have. So you saw all the states and learned some basics about the structure. I just want to come back to the map with the whole Germany, because I just want to give you two more details about the past I was talking about. As you know, Germany looked absolutely different before the Second World War and during the Second World War than it does today. And between the Second World War and the reunification, there was a lot of difference to what you see today. I shortly mentioned this in this video already, but what you see now are the states that belonged to the Federal Republic of Germany before 1990, when Germany was split into two countries after the Second World War. The western states contained the occupation zones of the United Kingdom, the USA and France. As you can see, there are these western states I mentioned before, and I also marked Berlin because Berlin was something special at that time. Berlin was also a divided city. For those of you who don't know, Berlin was also split into sectors between the UK, the US, France and Russia, and like the western states, France, Britain and the UK took care of their part of Berlin together, but the Russians separated their part from the rest. And the Russians had these states and the other half of Berlin, and formed it later on into the German Democratic Republic. It lasted from its founding until 1990. As you know, in 1989 the Berlin Wall came down, but it took another year until the 3rd October of 1990 until Germany was reunited. So officially the GDR ended on the 3rd October in 1990. And this was the Russian sector, and they put in place a socialist communist government which built a wall around it so the people couldn't run away. But this is just a quick overview. I won't go into details today, but that's just some basic knowledge I thought you should have. That's it for today. I hope I could bring some clarity or some new information to you, and it was a bit interesting. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and give it a like if you liked it. Don't forget this. And I hope to see you next week in our next edition of German Politics Explained. But for now, have a nice Sunday and goodbye.